Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, April 25th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will see a high of 68.4 degrees today, with a low of 55.0, which should make for a relatively mild Saturday. Turning to our top stories, we are investigating why DACA status is no longer serving as a reliable shield against deportation for recipients. We will also dive into the potential transformation of California's election procedures as we break down the proposed 2026 voter ID initiative. Beyond these primary topics, we have a variety of other important updates to share with you as we keep you informed throughout the day. We have a busy show ahead of us, so stay tuned for all these updates and much more coming up right here on Alex's News. Good morning. We start today with a major development that could reshape the lives of roughly 505,000 people protected under the DACA program. A ruling from the Justice Department yesterday is sending shockwaves through immigrant communities and courtrooms alike. Ethan covers immigration policy for us and has been following this closely. Ethan, what exactly happened yesterday?
So yesterday, Friday, April 24th, the Board of Immigration Appeals issued a precedent-setting decision in the case known as Matter of Catalina Xochitl Santiago. A three-judge panel ruled that having active DACA status is not a sufficient legal reason to halt someone's deportation or administratively close their removal proceedings. The BIA is the highest administrative body for immigration law within the Justice Department, so this carries enormous weight. As Justice.gov and the Texas Tribune note, because this is a precedent decision, it's now binding on every immigration judge in the country.
So walk us through who Catalina Xochitl Santiago is and how her case became the center of all this.
She's a prominent DACA recipient and community organizer. According to reporting from WYPR and NPR, she was detained by Customs and Border Protection back in August 2025 while trying to board a domestic flight in El Paso. An immigration judge named Michael Pletters initially terminated her removal proceedings, citing her DACA status as the reason. But the Department of Homeland Security appealed that decision, and the BIA sided with DHS, establishing that DACA is merely a matter of prosecutorial discretion and doesn't constitute lawful status or any kind of statutory defense.
That phrase, prosecutorial discretion, seems really important. What does that actually mean for Dreamers day to day?
It essentially means the government views DACA as a choice not to deport someone, rather than a right not to be deported. That's a huge distinction. Advocates have called this a quiet rollback of the program because it strips away what many Dreamers long assumed was an absolute shield against removal. Now immigration judges can no longer halt a deportation solely because someone holds DACA status, even if that person has done everything right.
And this didn't happen in a vacuum, right? How does it fit into the broader strategy from the administration?
It's very much a cornerstone of the second Trump administration's mass deportation initiative. The Guardian and the LA Times report that since January 2025, the administration has systematically argued that DACA provides no legal standing. Internally, the Department of Justice has fired over 100 immigration judges and reduced the BIA from 28 members down to 15, appointing more conservative-leaning judges focused on expedited removals. An NPR analysis found the BIA now rules in favor of government lawyers in 97% of publicly posted cases, which is a 30% increase over the 16-year average.
97%. That's staggering. Has DHS taken any other steps beyond the courtroom?
Yes, DHS has actually begun urging DACA recipients to self-deport, maintaining that the program confers no indefinite right to remain in the United States. On top of that, the administration is reportedly slow-rolling renewal applications to let them expire. Once someone's DACA lapses, they become an immediate target for enforcement. So it's a two-pronged approach, one through the courts and one through bureaucratic delay.
Now, the administration has pointed to criminal history data to justify going after DACA recipients. What do those numbers actually show?
This is one of the most contested parts of the story. Former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem reported that between January and November 2025, 261 DACA recipients were arrested and 86 were removed. According to ABC News and the Texas Tribune, Noam claimed 92% of those individuals had criminal histories, but that number doesn't hold up under scrutiny.
How so?
Investigations by the National Immigration Project of the National Lawyers Guild and the American Immigration Council dug into granular data provided to Congress. They found that only 48% of the arrested dreamers had actual criminal convictions. 44% had only pending charges or arrests where no charges were ever filed. Santiago's own case is a perfect example. DHS cited a 2020 arrest for trespassing and narcotics, but the Graham County attorney confirmed his office never prosecuted the case due to insufficient evidence. And here's the key part. Under the BIA ruling, the government can now pursue deportation even against compliant dreamers with no criminal record whatsoever.
There's also been pushback from federal judges. Tell us about the Estrada Juarez case.
Maria de Jesus Estrada Juarez is a DACA recipient who was deported to Mexico earlier this year, despite having no criminal record. The Sacramento Bee and FWD.us highlighted her case extensively. On March 23, 2026, U.S. District Judge Dina Coggins issued what she called a scathing order, describing the deportation as a, quote, flagrant violation, end quote, of legal rights. She ordered the government to bring Estrada Juarez back to the United States.
But does yesterday's BIA ruling undercut what Judge Coggins said?
It directly contradicts her reasoning. Judge Coggins argued that DACA creates a, quote, legitimate claim of entitlement, end quote, under the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause. The BIA, on the other hand, maintains DACA is a non-binding policy of discretion, with no constitutional weight. So now you've got administrative courts saying one thing and federal district courts saying another. Many legal experts believe this tug-of-war is destined for the Supreme Court.
In the meantime, are there any legal protections still standing for DACA recipients?
There are a few critical firewalls. According to Bloomberg Law and the American Immigration Lawyers Association, one important shield is the Amicus Center for Immigrant Rights versus EOIR injunction issued in March 2026. The DOJ had tried to slash the time to file a BIA appeal from 30 days down to 10 days, and that injunction blocks that rule. So DACA recipients targeted under the Santiago ruling still have a full 30-day window to seek appellate review. It's procedural, but it could make the difference between someone getting legal help or not.
What about the advocacy groups? How are they responding?
They've mobilized fast. United We Dream and the American Immigration Council are preparing emergency stays and a putative nationwide class action lawsuit. Their argument is that the administration has violated the reliance interests of DACA recipients, which is a principle the Supreme Court actually upheld in the 2020 DHS versus Regents decision. Separately, the National Immigration Litigation Alliance is leading a class action called DVD versus DHS to prevent what are known as third country removals, where dreamers get deported to countries where they have absolutely no connections.
And what's happening on Capitol Hill? Is Congress doing anything?
Democracy Now! And KPBS report several legislative measures are under debate right now. The Save America Act, introduced in March 2026, specifically aims to codify DACA protections and prohibit removals based solely on entry history. The American Dream and Promise Act of 2025, reintroduced by Representative Sylvia Garcia and Maria Elvira Salazar, remains the primary bipartisan vehicle for a path to citizenship. And Senator Dick Durbin has called for emergency floor votes on the DREAM Act to bypass the administrative court's decision before his planned retirement.
Any effort to use the budget process to put limits on enforcement?
Yes, Representative Delia Ramirez and the Hispanic Caucus have demanded that the fiscal year 27 appropriations bill restrict ICE from using federal funds to deport active DACA enrollees. They've called the Santiago ruling a, quote, weaponization, end quote, of the immigration courts. But even with all these efforts, nothing has passed yet, and the state of DACA remains deeply precarious as of this morning.
So bottom line, what should DACA recipients be thinking about today?
They should know that their status no longer guarantees protection from removal proceedings. They still have legal avenues. The 30-day appeal window is intact, and major lawsuits are being filed. But the assumption that DACA equals safety has fundamentally changed as of yesterday. Legal groups are urging every recipient to consult an immigration attorney and make sure their renewal applications are current, because a lapsed status puts them at the front of the line for enforcement.
A lot to watch in the days ahead. Ethan, thank you for breaking all of that down for us.
Thanks, Grace.
We've got one more story coming up, so stay with us. Our second story this morning involves a major shift brewing in California politics. A Republican-backed voter ID initiative has officially qualified for the November ballot. Chloe's been following this one closely. Chloe, what happened yesterday?
So yesterday, April 24th, California Secretary of State Shirley Weber officially announced that this measure qualified for the November 3, 2026 general election. It's officially titled the California Voter Identification and Voter List Maintenance Requirements Initiative, and it would amend the state constitution. According to CalMatters, proponents needed 874,641 valid signatures to get on the ballot. They submitted roughly 1.35 million, and state officials verified 962,106 as valid, so they cleared that threshold pretty comfortably.
Who's behind the push?
The campaign is led by Assemblymember Carl DeMaio, a Republican from San Diego, and State Senator Tony Strickland, a Republican from Huntington Beach. DeMaio heads a political action committee called Reform California, which drove this effort. Now, I should note that the Desert Sun mistakenly labeled Senator Strickland as a Democrat in early reports, but he's actually a prominent Republican and a staunch conservative. Reform California reported that the qualification effort was fueled by a $10 million fundraising drive, with a significant portion of that money coming from Julie Luckey, the mother of tech billionaire and Oculus founder Palmer Luckey.
$10 million is a lot of signature gathering. Does this measure actually have support beyond the Republican base?
DeMaio certainly claims it does. He's asserted that nearly 47% of the collected signatures came from registered Democrats and independents. That's based on internal data from Reform California, though. The Secretary of State's office verifies voter registration but doesn't typically certify partisan breakdowns of signers. So those numbers haven't been independently confirmed. Still, DeMaio maintains the movement has a broad bipartisan base, and polling does suggest the general concept of voter ID is popular across party lines.
So what would this measure actually require if voters approve it in November?
There are 5 primary mandates, according to ABC 10 and CBS News. First, voters at polling places would need to present government-issued photo identification, like a driver's license, passport, or military ID. Second, because the majority of Californians vote by mail, the initiative requires voters to write the last 4 digits of a government-issued identification number, such as a Social Security or driver's license number, on the outside of their ballot envelope. And third, the Secretary of State and county election offices would have to cross-reference voter rolls with federal and state databases, including the DMV and Social Security Administration, to verify the citizenship status of all registered voters.
That's 3. You said 5 mandates?
Right. The 4th provision mandates regular audits of voter lists to remove deceased individuals or those who've moved out of state. And the 5th is designed to address concerns about what critics call a poll tax. The initiative would require the state to provide a free voter identification card to any eligible voter who requests one. That free ID provision is significant because it's meant to blunt the argument that this measure prices people out of voting.
And what are supporters saying about why this is necessary?
Senator Strickland told CalMatters that voter ID requirements are, in his words, a common-sense step to restore public trust. He argues they're popular across party lines and serve as a safeguard against the disenfranchisement of legal voters by fraudulent activity. Proponents also often cite a 2025 report by the state's United Democracy Center, which suggested that high voter confidence can actually boost turnout by approximately 3 to 3.7 percentage points. So their argument is essentially that this isn't about suppressing votes, it's about making people trust the system enough to participate.
But opponents see it very differently, don't they?
Absolutely. A coalition of civil rights groups has launched a vigorous no campaign. We're talking about the ACLU of Northern California, the League of Women Voters of California, and California Common Cause, among others. As reported by Democracy Docket, these groups argue the measure is rooted in, quote, election lies, end quote, and will lead to systemic voter suppression. Their central concern is that the requirements disproportionately impact low-income individuals, seniors, and people of color who may lack ready access to the underlying documents, like birth certificates needed to obtain government IDs.
What about that mail-in ballot requirement? Writing your ID number on the outside of an envelope seems like it could raise some eyebrows.
It really has. Privacy advocates have raised serious concerns, suggesting that writing sensitive identification numbers on the exterior of envelopes increases the risk of identity theft. And remember, the majority of Californians vote by mail, so this isn't some edge case. This would affect millions of voters. That's one of the provisions opponents believe could cause real problems, even for people who do have the required identification.
Is there research out there that tells us what actually happens in states that pass these kinds of laws?
There is, and it cuts both ways, which is part of why this debate is so heated. Proponents often cite a 2021 study published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics by Enrico Cantoni and Vincent Ponce, which found that strict voter ID laws had, quote, no negative effect on registration or turnout, end quote, overall. But opponents counter with evidence from Arizona, where nonpartisan groups like Demos found that documentary proof of citizenship requirements led to the rejection of over 30,000 eligible voter registrations between 2005 and 2014.
Didn't Georgia see record turnout after passing new ID laws, though?
It did, and proponents frequently point to that, but the full picture is more complicated. An analysis by the Brennan Center for Justice found that while overall turnout in Georgia was high in 2022, the racial turnout gap actually widened during that cycle. White turnout significantly outpaced non-white participation, so the question becomes whether you're looking at total numbers or at who's being left behind within those numbers. That's really the crux of the disagreement between the two sides.
What does polling show about how Californians feel about all this?
The polling is really interesting and honestly kind of telling. A 2026 poll from the UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies, also known as IGS, found that 60 to 65% of Californians initially support the concept of showing ID to vote. That sounds like strong support. But here's the catch. When respondents were informed that the measure could potentially suppress eligible votes or cost the state significant money, support dropped to 37 to 39%. So context really matters here, and both campaigns know that framing will be everything heading into November.
Speaking of cost, what's the price tag on something like this?
Nonpartisan state analysts from the Legislative Analyst's Office estimate that implementing the measure could cost the state tens of millions of dollars up front. And that's just the beginning. The ongoing citizenship verification and the provision of free ID cards could run to potentially hundreds of millions of dollars annually. That fiscal reality is likely to become a major talking point for the opposition as we get closer to the vote.
Has anyone tried to challenge this legally before it even reaches voters?
Not yet. As of today, April 25th, no formal lawsuits have been filed to block the initiative from the ballot. Legal experts say that challenging a statewide constitutional amendment is a significantly higher hurdle than challenging a local ordinance, and that's actually key context here. Back in January 2026, the California Supreme Court struck down a local voter ID law in Huntington Beach. That was Measure A, ruling that election requirements are a statewide concern and can't be independently mandated by charter cities. By seeking a constitutional amendment, the DeMaio and Strickland initiative essentially bypasses the preemption arguments that defeated the Huntington Beach law. It's a legally savvier approach.
So what happens next on the timeline?
The Secretary of State is scheduled to formally certify the initiative for the ballot on June 25, 2026. After that, it's a full sprint to November. Both the Californians for Voter ID campaign and the No on Voter ID coalition are gearing up for what's expected to be one of the most expensive and high-profile ballot battles in California history. The opposition recently got a $250,000 boost from the ACLU of Northern California, and spending on both sides is expected to climb dramatically from here.
It's going to be quite a fight to watch over the next several months. Chloe, thanks for breaking all of that down for us.
Happy to do it, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. President Donald Trump is doubling down on diplomacy by dispatching his special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner to Islamabad. The pair is looking to spark a conversation and end an 8-week-old war with Iran. They are slated to meet with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is currently on a regional tour that includes stops in Oman and Russia. While the White House is hoping for some face-to-face time to broker a peace deal, Iran's foreign ministry is playing hard to get, suggesting that any observations will be passed through Pakistani mediators instead of direct talks. This mission is a high-stakes attempt to uncork the global energy market, which has been feeling the squeeze since the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The administration is keeping the pressure cooker on high, maintaining a naval blockade and slapping new sanctions on a Chinese oil refinery and 40 shipping companies. If these talks in Pakistan do not find a peaceful rhythm, the president warns that military strikes will resume. In financial news, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is finally out of the woods. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced that the Justice Department has closed its criminal investigation into a $2.5 billion renovation at the Fed's headquarters. While the probe could be reopened if the Inspector General finds more dirt during a cost overrun review, for now Powell has a clean bill of health. This development has broken a legislative logjam in the Senate, where Tom Tillis had been blocking the confirmation of Kevin Warsh until this investigation was terminated. With the cloud of suspicion lifted, the central bank can keep its interest on stability before Powell's term expires in May of 2026. Things are heating up in the southeast, where record-breaking wildfires are blighting the landscape. We are saddened to report that 59-year-old volunteer firefighter James Kevin Cruz died after a medical emergency while battling a brush fire in Florida. In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp says at least 120 homes have been turned to ash. One particularly destructive blaze in Brantley County was sparked when a foil party balloon had a shocking encounter with power lines, while another 50-square-mile fire was ignited by someone welding a gate. A combination of historic drought and a massive fuel load of dead trees from Hurricane Helene has created a powder keg, leading to burn bans in 91 counties and the deployment of the Georgia National Guard. Overseas, a 3-week extension has been added to the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. While the White House is trying to keep this window of opportunity open, Hezbollah is calling the extension meaningless and continues to trade fire with the Israeli military. With over 1 million people displaced, the humanitarian situation is a heavy burden, and the truce remains on thin ice. Finally, the Department of Justice is expanding its horizons regarding the death penalty. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche announced that federal executions will now include firing squads, electrocution, and lethal gas to bypass pharmaceutical shortages. This shift aims to ensure that 44 defendants on death row meet their final appointments without further delay. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.